The air in the conference room is thick, heavy. It smells of stale coffee and the nervous sweat of important men. I sit perfectly still, hands clasped in my lap, a ghost at the feast. He's at the head of the table, oblivious, puffing his chest, the familiar scent of his expensive cologne doing nothing to cut through the tension that only I seem to feel. His executives shift nervously. They know something is happening, but they don't know what. Not really. Their eyes flick to me, then away. They've seen me around the office parties, the silent partner on his arm. They don't see me. They see an accessory. Soon, they'll see something else entirely. My heart doesn't pound. It hums, a low, steady vibration beneath my ribs, like a hidden engine just reaching its speed. I watch his face, the smug set of his jaw, the way his eyes flick dismissively over the open brief before him, already sure of the outcome. He doesn't feel the tremor running through the foundations of his empire. He thinks he built this castle on rock. I know the truth. It was built on sand, and the tide is coming in. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. My life, just a few months ago, felt like a well-oiled machine. Or maybe a beautifully constructed cage. From the outside, it was enviable. The sprawling house in the right neighborhood, the manicured lawn, the cars, the effortless glide through the social calendar. He was the architect of this world, the man who built his company from a single idea into a formidable presence. I was the woman beside him, managing the household, planning the events, smiling the right smile. My world revolved around his orbit, a moon reflecting his light. I told myself it was partnership. I told myself his ambition fueled us both. He provided the structure, the financial security, the outward success. I provided the quiet anchor, the home, the support structure he claimed he needed. My own aspirations felt small, whispered things I nurtured in the quiet hours, a creative project, a long-held dream of building something entirely my own, something that wasn't an extension of his success. I had started it years ago, small, almost as a hobby. A different kind of investment, a different kind of growth. Something he barely registered, or maybe just humored. He saw it as my little distraction, a quaint pastime. He was busy building his empire. He didn't see the tiny seed I was watering in the shadows. The shift wasn't a sudden earthquake, more like a slow, insidious chilling of the air. It started subtly. Less discussion about shared finances, more decisions made unilaterally. His answers about money became vague, then evasive, then curt. The partnership I thought we had became a dictatorship. He started treating me less like a wife and more like an employee whose performance was unsatisfactory. He criticized my spending, questioned every purchase, no matter how small or necessary. The comfortable flow of our life began to stutter. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Something was fundamentally wrong, but I couldn't grasp the scale of it yet. I attributed it to stress at work, a bad quarter, a big deal he was worried about. I made excuses for him, for the growing coldness in his eyes. I minimized my own unease. Then came the day the machine stopped dead. He sat across from me at the polished dining table, a place usually reserved for elaborate dinner parties, not brutal conversations. The air conditioner hummed, but I felt a sudden, deep cold. His face was set, unyielding. He didn't raise his voice. That would have implied emotion. He spoke with chilling precision. "I've decided to make some changes," he said, his gaze flat. "Effective immediately, I'm cutting off your access to the joint accounts. All of them." My breath caught. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the explanation that would make this make sense. There was none. "You've become complacent," he continued, as if discussing a poorly performing stock. "You don't appreciate the value of what I provide. Maybe if you have to manage on your own for a while, you'll understand manage on my own?" With what? My small personal savings, the remnants of my own pre-marriage life? It was a pittance compared to the life we lived. It wasn't about value. It was about control. He was yanking the leash, reminding me who held the power, who paid for this gilded cage. My world, the one I had built within his, collapsed inwards. The shock was physical. My ears rang. The room seemed to tilt. He had cut the cords, leaving me adrift. The immediate aftermath was a scramble, a panicked clawing for purchase on a suddenly slick surface. My cards were declined, humiliatingly, at the grocery store, the cashier's pitying gaze a hot brand. Online accounts frozen. The digital locks slamming shut. I felt a visceral terror I hadn't experienced since childhood. The sheer practicality of survival hit me like a physical blow. How do I buy food? How do I pay for gas? The household bills, the utilities, they were due. He hadn't just cut off my allowance. He'd severed my lifeline to the world we shared. I tried talking to him, pleading, reasoning. His responses were cold. Variations of, "you'll figure it out," or "this is for your own good." My carefully constructed composure crumbled. Tears came, born of fear and indignity, but they had no effect. He seemed almost pleased by my distress. It confirmed his power. He had backed me into a corner. Alone. Or so he thought. In the quiet desperation, I reached out to the one person who knew a different side of me, the side that existed before the gilded cage. The silent partner. The one whose identity I'd guarded, even for my husband. This was a connection forged years before, born of a mutual project, a shared vision I'd invested in with my own money, my own time, believing in this person's potential when no one else did. They had succeeded wildly, building their own empire, but our original agreement, our partnership, had remained. Silent, discreet, significant. I had never needed to lean on it heavily until now. I made the call, my voice trembling as I explained the absurdity, the cruelty of my situation. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a calm, measured response. He did what? The disbelief in their voice was a small comfort. I laid out the stark reality. The frozen accounts, the lack of access, the deliberate isolation. I spoke of my fear, the raw vulnerability I felt. And then I spoke of the project, the one he dismissed, the one my partner and I had built. I explained how vulnerable it suddenly felt too, tied up as it was, albeit silently, in the infrastructure of my life, which he was dismantling. My partner listened, asked sharp, insightful questions about his business, his vulnerabilities, his ego. They saw not just my personal crisis, but the strategic implications. The conversation shifted from me seeking help to survive to something far larger, far more dangerous. A different kind of plan began to form in the quiet space between our voices. The survival instinct morphed into something colder, harder. His pressure didn't ease, it intensified. He started legal maneuvers, leveraging his resources to make the financial cutoff seem legitimate, framing it as necessary restructuring, painting me as irresponsible. He began limiting my access to the house itself, changing codes, making it clear my presence was temporary, conditional. The humiliation deepened. Friends who had been so eager to accept his hospitality suddenly became awkward, distant. His narrative that I was somehow unstable or wasteful was taking root. I felt increasingly isolated, trapped. Every avenue seemed blocked. I was running on fumes, emotionally and practically. Outwardly, I maintained a facade of strained composure, but inside, the fear gnawed. There were days I sat alone in the vast, silent house, feeling the weight of the walls, the oppressive silence, and the terrifying uncertainty of the future. The silent partner was working in the background, their calls infrequent, their words guarded, but the intensity of their focus was palpable. They asked for information, seemingly random details about his company structure, his key personnel, his finances. I provided what I could, feeling like I was feeding pieces into a machine I didn't understand, trusting blindly that it was building something that could save me. This period was the deepest dive into the crisis. I felt stripped bare, vulnerable, like a target in an open field. He had taken everything he thought mattered, the money, the status, the control. He believed he had won. He saw my struggle, my visible distress, and interpreted it as defeat. He didn't see the hidden engine, the one I had nurtured for years, quietly gathering power. He didn't see the silent partner, the one who owed me nothing but chose to stand with me. He didn't see the steel that was hardening in my own core. The day the paperwork was finalized felt anticlimactic and terrifying all at once. My silent partner called. Their voice was calm, steady. "It's done," they said. "The offer is in." Irrevocable, the offer wasn't for a stake or a merger. It was for the whole thing. The acquisition. His company. The silent partner, seeing the depth of his cruelty and the strategic opportunity presented by his arrogance and potential financial overreach, which my partner's due diligence had uncovered, had decided to go for the jugular. And they were doing it with my blessing, my quiet support, and leveraging the very project he had dismissed, which had become far more valuable than he could have ever imagined. The turning point wasn't a sudden burst of strength. It was a quiet, internal click. A decision made in the bone. There was no going back. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overlaid with a layer of grim determination. This wasn't just about getting my life back. It was about reclaiming my autonomy. It was about showing him, and the world, that I was not an accessory to be discarded. I was a force in my own right. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing an outfit that wasn't for him, or for anyone else but for me. Something sharp, understated, and undeniably powerful. I drove to his office building, the place I had avoided for weeks, the air around me crackling with a strange mix of dread and anticipation. The security guard, who usually waved me through with a smile, looked at me with surprise. I walked through the lobby, the marble floor cold and unforgiving under my heels, and felt like a stranger in a place I had once felt entitled to belong. The silence partner was already there, waiting. We exchanged a look. No words were needed. The trap was set. The meeting is underway now. My husband, oblivious to the seismic shift that has just occurred, is laying out his vision, his plans, his numbers. He's confident, maybe even arrogant. The executives around the table nod, taking notes. They still don't understand why I'm here, silent, watching. Then, my silent partner speaks. Their voice is calm, authoritative, cutting through the carefully constructed corporate jargon. "Gentlemen," they say, and the shift in the air is immediate. Everyone turns. "There's been a development," my husband frowns, annoyed by the interruption. "What development?" he asks, his tone dismissive. My partner places a file on the table, sliding it towards him. "This one," they say. The file is thin, deceptively simple. It contains the signed agreement, the offer letter, the confirmation of the acquisition. My husband picks it up, a flicker of annoyance on his face. He glances at the first page, then the second. His eyes widen. The color drains from his face. He looks at the signature line, then at the name printed clearly below it. Then he looks at me. The blood is pounding in my ears now, a different rhythm than before. It's not fear. It's something else. He stares at me, comprehension dawning, disbelief warring with dawning horror. He didn't know my silent partner's identity. He didn't know the scale of their success. He didn't know the depth of their loyalty to me. He certainly didn't know that my little hobby had been leveraged to help fund this, that the quiet project he ignored had grown into something that could devour his empire whole. "You," he stutters, pointing a shaking finger at me. His voice is hoarse. "You did this." I meet his gaze, my expression unreadable. I don't need to say anything. The file in his hands, the stunned silence of his executives, the quiet presence of my silent partner, it all speaks volumes. He looks back at the file, then around the table at the faces of his leadership team, who are now looking at him with a mixture of shock and something that might be fear. His chest seems to deflate. The smugness vanishes, replaced by naked panic. He clutches the edge of the table, his knuckles white. The carefully constructed facade of power shatters. He makes a sound, half gasp, half choke. He tries to speak again, but no words come out. His eyes roll back slightly. His grip loosens. And then, slowly, agonizingly, his body slumps forward, hitting the polished surface of the table with a dull thud. He collapses. The room erupts in controlled chaos as people rush forward. I remain seated, still, watching. The engine inside me goes quiet. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the hushed voices of the executives calling for medical help and the distant wail of approaching sirens. He was taken away, a sudden, shocking end to the confrontation. The meeting dissolved, the empire momentarily forgotten in the face of a very human vulnerability. My silent partner stayed with me, their presence a quiet anchor in the storm. There were legal formalities, transitions, the cold, clinical process of one entity consuming another. The company that was his lifeblood, the source of his control over me, was now under new ownership. The silent partner, the one he never saw coming, was in charge. My role shifted again. I wasn't an employee, wasn't a disposable wife. I became a consultant, an advisor, someone with unique insight into the company's dynamics, someone now holding significant interest due to my partnership agreement. The house, the financial assets he had tried to weaponize, became part of the complex negotiations, tangled in the larger acquisition. The tables had not just turned, they had been flipped entirely, scattering the pieces of his carefully built world. The emotional aftermath was complex. There was no triumphant joy, only a deep, weary exhaustion. A hollowness. The man I had built a life with, the man who had tried to break me, had been broken himself, not by my hand directly, but by the consequences of his own actions, amplified by my quiet resilience and a long-held loyalty I had earned elsewhere. There was a bittersweet ache. This wasn't the future I had envisioned, not this brutal dismantling. But it was a future I had survived to build, on my own terms. The gilded cage was gone. The price of freedom was high, marked by the wreckage of a marriage and a man's career, but the air outside felt vast and thin and terrifyingly, wonderfully mine. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.